When my parents fired me, it wasn't just a job I lost. It was my identity. AITA spent 8 years building their company from the ground up, working insane hours, sacrificing weekends, dates, sleep, everything, just to make them proud. So when they called me into the office one Friday afternoon and told me, "We're letting you go," I thought it was a sick joke. My dad looked guilty. My mom didn't even meet my eyes. I remember laughing, waiting for someone to say gotcha. But no one did. They told me the company was struggling, that they had to make cuts. But I knew better. I checked the payroll later and found out my younger brother, Kyle, had just been promoted with a raise. Kyle, the golden child, the one who barely showed up on time, who treated the staff like crap, who had once called me a bootlicker for actually caring about the family business. When I confronted my parents, my mom said, "Kyle needs this job more than you do. You're smart. You'll land on your feet." That sentence burned into my brain. I'd given up everything for them, and they threw me out like trash to protect the one person who'd never lifted a finger. Then came the real gut punch. 2 weeks later, my fiancée, Emily, who also worked there in marketing, started acting weird, distant, avoiding me. And when I stopped by the office to grab my things, I saw her laughing with my brother in the break room. His hand brushed her arm, and she didn't move away. That was the moment something in me broke. I didn't scream. I didn't make a scene. I just smiled, walked out, and promised myself one thing. I'd never be the one begging again. They fired me to save my brother. But one day I'd make sure they all paid for it. After I left, I slept on a futon in a friend's spare room for 3 weeks. I ate cereal for dinner. I took interviews that felt like charity. And I watched my parents' emails from the outside, like a ghost, not because I wanted to, but because I needed to know the truth. The truth was uglier than I'd imagined. They quietly canceled a few client contracts and stalled investment talks while they pumped Kyle into a managerial role. The company wasn't failing. They were hiding money and rerouting opportunities to cushion Kyle and his new projects. I told myself revenge was petty. I wasn't a petty man. I'd always believed in loyalty, in family, in building things that outlived me. But then I watched Emily post a picture with Kyle at some company gala, her arm linked with his. That dumb, proud smile I recognized from our engagement photos. I texted her. She read it, then read it again. And then she said, "We need space." No explanation. No argument. Just space. For a while, I tried to be the good ex-fiancé trademark. I deleted photos. I told mutual friends to stop talking about it. I focused on rebuilding my life, not hers. I took a job at a local startup doing contract work. And somewhere between late nights and coffee runs, I began to remember how to lead without the weight of my parents' expectations. I met other people who believed in the work, and their trust was like oxygen after being smothered for years. One of those people was Maya, a product designer with a brutal sense of humor and an uncanny ability to pitch our tiny ideas to investors. She didn't care about my family name. She cared about the product. With her help, a messy notebook of plans, and a little seed funding from a college friend, we spun up a company that did what my parents' firm used to do, only faster, leaner, and actually honest about pricing. I told myself the new company was to prove I could survive. I didn't sign any checks to hurt my parents. I didn't draft any press releases calling them out. But as we grew, people started to notice similarities. Same niche, different ethics. A couple of my old clients slipped away from my parents to our team. One by one, doors that had once been closed to me opened, because I had a product that worked and a team that shipped. When the first major client left my parents' firm and signed with us, my mother called. Her voice was small, in a way I'd never heard. She began with apologies, soft, tentative, and then she asked if we could meet. I took the meeting because I was still me. Somewhere under the rage, I wanted answers. What she said in that conference room wiped the last of the naivete off my face. They hadn't just fired me to save money. They'd been bribed by an investor to prioritize Kyle's venture, the one he'd been nursing on the side. My parents thought they were protecting the family legacy. My brother thought he deserved it. Emily thought she was rescuing someone she saw trapped. After that, nothing felt simple. I was rebuilding my life, and without intending to. Building a rival that could crush theirs. I told myself it wasn't too personal. But every pitch that won a client from them felt like proof of something darker, that I could hurt them worse than they had hurt me. I thought I could handle the truth. I was wrong. A week after that meeting, I ran into Emily at a coffee shop near the office, the kind of place she always picked because the lighting made her look like she knew she was in a movie. She saw me and froze. I said. She didn't tea for a long minute. She just looked at me like I was a stranger she'd once loved. I didn't start angry. I started pragmatic. I asked the questions that mattered. Why didn't you tell me? Why did you let my family do that to me? Her answers were half-steps and apologies, and a phrase that felt like a shovel in my chest. It's complicated. Complicated, I senti the same as betrayal. Complicated is forgivable. But then she told me about Kyle, not as a rumor, not as innuendo, but as something she'd tried to ignore until she stopped being able to. They'd been seeing each other for months. It started when she stayed late to fix an ad, and he bought her coffee. It turned into private jokes, then into shared nights. She swore she hadn't meant for it to be a thing, that she'd been confused and felt guilty and had planned to end it. She hadn't told me because she hadn't known how to tell me she loved someone else. I remember the sound I made when she said, "I'm sorry it wasn't a shout." It was a small, broken noise that I didn't even know I could make. I left without another word. That night, I didn't sleep. I texted Kyle not to start a fight, but to understand why he'd done it, why he'd taken the job I built, why he'd taken my fiancée, why he acted like he deserved everything. His reply was a single emoji. I still don't know if that was cowardice or triumph. The next morning, I opened my laptop and looked at the company financials again. I had a choice. I could let myself be the tragic character in everyone else's story, the one who got fired and lost his girl and faded away. Or I could bet everything I had left on the one thing that wasn't tied to their lies, the company Maya and I were building. I chose to push. Maybe that's where I started to become the person I swore I wasn't. We launched an aggressive marketing campaign. We undercut proposals. We reached out to every client we thought would listen, with a message that sounded less like a sales pitch and more like a saber-rattling letter. We build differently. We pay our team. We don't play favorites. We did it with a smile, but the intent wasn't kind. When the hires started leaving my parents' firm to work with us, my mother called again. This time she didn't apologize. She said, "Be fair." I wanted to laugh. Fair had been a table they'd already tilted the moment they signed my termination. That night, alone in my tiny rented place, I stared at the ceiling and asked myself, am I defending myself? Or am I taking pleasure in their collapse? I wanted to tell you. I knew the answer. I didn't eat. All I knew was this: the line between justice and revenge is paper thin, and I could feel it tearing under my hands. AITA for building my business into a weapon against the people who hurt me. Once the momentum picked up, it felt like an avalanche. Clients who'd been polite to my parents for years started scheduling discovery calls with US. Employees who complained about hours and favoritism began sliding into my DMs, asking about openings. Maya was merciless in the best way. She optimized our process until it was ridiculous how fast we could deliver, and investors who'd ghosted me before suddenly wanted in. At first the wins were quiet. Contract here, hire there. My heart did a weird stutter of satisfaction every time someone chose us over the family name. I told myself it was professional validation. I told myself they were choosing competence over nepotism. But then the hits got louder. One of my parents' long-term vendors, the one who'd always given them favorable terms, emailed to terminate their partnership. Another client publicly mentioned on social media how relieved they were to switch providers to a company that treated people fairly. My parents' inbox filled with angry calls and passive-aggressive notes about loyalty and family values. Then came the email that felt like a punch. My mother accused me of orchestrating a smear campaign. She forwarded screenshots of a few anonymous posts on industry forums criticizing their ethics. And she included one line that felt like a knife. If you're behind this, you've crossed a line. I wasn't he. But I didn't to tell her the truth, that I'd hired a PR freelance to highlight issues my parents had ignored for years. I rationalized it. We were correcting the narrative they decontrolled. We were exposing what they'd hidden. Kyle texted me once, a thinly veiled threat about ruin and pride. He accused me of selling out our family. I wanted to reply that he sold out me first, but instead I blocked him. It felt childish. It felt necessary. Word spread in our small industry. People took sides. Some friends told me I should have taken the high road. Others sent me links to interviews and articles where disgruntled former employees praised our transparency. I couldn't tell which group I wanted to belong to anymore. That Thanksgiving, my parents invited the whole family over with a note that said we need to talk. When I arrived, the living room smelled like burnt turkey and tension. My father sat like a judge. My mother's eyes were rimmed with exhaustion. And Kyle looked smug, like the victor in a story he had to write. They accused me of intentionally sabotaging them. I listed facts. They accused me of breaking an unspoken code. I said nothing about Emily being in Kyle's bed when I still thought they were different people. I didn't even mention the way my parents had smiled when they fired me. I tried to be rational. They tried to be hurt. At the end of the night, my mother said quietly, "We raised you better than this." I walked out angry, wondering if I'd raised myself worse. AITA for letting the business I built become the instrument of my family's undoing, especially when I started using tactics I wouldn't have used before. The next few months felt like living in a storm with no calm. My company wasn't just growing, it was eating into theirs. I started getting calls from their clients that I hadn't even approached. Some wanted to leave quietly. Others wanted to renegotiate contracts that my parents had promised wouldn't be touched. Maya and I were careful, but the thrill of it was undeniable. Every time a client left them for us, I felt a strange mix of pride and guilt. Then there was Emily. She resurfaced out of nowhere, sending a brief text, "We need to talk." "It's over with Kyle." I froze for a second. I allowed myself to hope that maybe some part of what we had wasn't destroyed, but the message carried a strange undertone, not apology, not regret, but something that felt like testing the waters. I met her at a cafe. She explained that she had realized Kyle wasn't the man she thought he was. Selfish, shallow, opportunistic. I didn't feel relief. I didn't even feel anger. I felt nothing. The betrayal had taken the shape of indifference, and yet part of me wanted to let her back, wanted to feel normal again. But the real conflict wasn't Emily. It was my reflection in the window, staring back at me like a stranger. The person I'd become calculating, ruthless, willing to exploit every weakness in the people who hurt me, was not the person I thought I was. I remembered nights of working late, arguing for fairness, trying to make the company ethical. Now ethics felt like a luxury I couldn't afford. I had to make choices that were ugly. I negotiated a deal with one of their major investors that guaranteed our company a dominant position in the market, knowing it would force my parents into defensive moves. I hired former employees who were loyal to me personally, not the family name. I published marketing that subtly highlighted their incompetence without ever naming names. Every action was small, deliberate, invisible to the public eye, but to my parents it was a dagger twisting slowly. By the time the quarter ended, their profits had dropped 25%. Kyle called me livid, accusing me of destroying the family, as if I deployed a war while they were just living their lives. My parents avoided me. My mother's apologies were lukewarm. My father's disappointment was palpable. And still at the center of it all, I asked myself, AITA for thriving? Were they failed AITA for using my pain as leverage? Or is this just survival? I realized there is a dangerous thrill in being in control when you were once powerless, and that thrill, once tasted, doesn't leave easily. It all came to a head during a board meeting I didn't want to attend. My parents had invited me under the pretense of family reconciliation. Kyle sat across from me smirking, like the chess master who decornered his opponent. My mother looked fragile, my father stoic, as if nothing could shake them, except maybe me. They began by talking about the past, using words like misunderstanding and youthful mistakes. I listened quietly, nodding when necessary, while internally counting every time I'd been betrayed, every sleepless night, every effort erased. When they finally asked what I wanted, I said 2 words: equity, transparency. The room went silent. My father's jaw tightened. My mother's eye started to Kyle. I laid out the terms: equal stake in the company, decisions made jointly, and no special treatment for family over merit. They scoffed, calling it harsh, unreasonable, and dramatic. I told them it was the only way I could respect the family name, if they could earn it, not just inherit it. Then Kyle laughed low and cruel. You think you can teach us how to run this family? You've been gone for years. You're nothing without us. Something inside me snapped. A calculated calm I'd maintained for months dissolved into a wave of anger I hadn't allowed myself to feel. I looked at him, at them, and said, I built my career on honesty, dedication, and results. You built yours on nepotism and lies. The company doesn't need you to survive. I do. Silence. That night I walked home, through the city lights reflecting on wet pavement. I realized how far I'd come and how far I'd fallen. My company was thriving, their business was crumbling. My ex-fiancée was potentially coming back into the picture, and I was no longer the person I had been. When they fired me, I was someone dangerous, someone who had learned to wield power like a weapon. I began to wonder if I had crossed a line, not legally, not publicly, but morally. Was this justice or vengeance? Every client I signed from them, every former employee who joined us, every subtle PR move, it all felt like a domino I had tipped intentionally. And yet, the part of me that remembered loyalty and fairness, the part I feared had been lost forever, whispered, Maybe this is what it takes to survive in a world where people betray you before breakfast. AITA for becoming the person they created. Or is this just the price of betrayal? The morning started like any other, but by noon it felt like the world had shifted on its axis. Emily called asking to meet at a neutral location, a small quiet park we'd once visited years ago. She looked different, fragile in a way that made my chest tighten. She said she wanted to explain herself, to make things right, but the words felt hollow against the memory of her months with Kyle. Before I could respond, a call from my lawyer interrupted. Kyle had filed a complaint against our company, claiming that confidential information had been stolen. A bold, desperate move that smelled more like panic than truth. I laughed bitterly, realizing that every action I'd taken to build and protect my company had provoked him into overreach. Emily arrived as I ended the call. She hesitated, then said, "I made mistakes. I should have left in sooner. I should have told you," her eyes pleaded. And for a second, I wanted to believe it. Wanted to forgive her. But forgiveness didn't feel like relief. It felt like weakness, and weakness had no place in the life I was building. And she dropped the bomb. They knew about us, my parents and yours. They planned this. Kyle, the promotion, the firing, everything. They wanted to see if you'd survive without them. My mind reeled. Everything I thought I knew, the betrayal, the heartbreak. The injustice suddenly had layers I hadn't considered. My parents weren't just protecting Kyle. They were testing me, and I had passed in the only way I knew how, by rising, fighting back, and building a company that could outshine theirs. I sat in stunned silence, the wind cutting through the park, wondering if my rage was justified, or if I had become a pawn in a game I hadn't realized I was playing. When Emily leaned closer, I wanted to reach out to forgive, to reclaim what we had. But Kyle's name, the image of him with her, the months of deceit and stolen moments held me back. I had learned that some betrayals leave marks you can't erase. By the end of the conversation, she left with a lingering question in her eyes. "Can you ever forgive me?" I didn't answer. I walked away, the weight of everything pressing down, knowing that some questions had no immediate answer. Back at the office, I saw the emails, clients' press mentions, investor interest, all pointing in one direction: us. My parents' company was bleeding. Kyle was panicking, and I was standing at the center of it, a force they had underestimated, a product of their own making. AITA for using every tool at my disposal to rise, knowing the people who hurt me would feel the sting of their own choices. Or is this simply the cost of survival in a world that plays dirty? The weeks that followed were relentless. Kyle became reckless, sending angry emails, threatening legal action, and even attempting to poach some of our key clients with underhanded tactics. My parents stayed in the background, their pride and guilt locked in a tense stalemate. Every day felt like walking on a wire above a pit, knowing that one misstep could destroy everything I built, or worse, drag me into a war I couldn't win. One evening, Maya and I stayed late at the office, reviewing the quarterly numbers. The growth was astonishing. We were outperforming my parents' company in every metric, and yet I felt a gnawing emptiness. This wasn't just business anymore. It was personal. And personal battles carry consequences that professional strategy never accounts for. Then Emily reached out again. She confessed that she still had feelings for me, but was terrified of the chaos surrounding our families. I didn't reply. I realized that any involvement with her now would blur the line I'd worked so hard to maintain between survival and obsession. My life had become a chessboard, and I couldn't let emotion be the piece that cost me the game. The real turning point came when my parents made their move. They attempted a hostile takeover of one of our smaller projects, hoping to squeeze us financially. Their strategy was sloppy, driven by desperation rather than skill. But it forced me to confront something I hadn't faced before: the human cost of my revenge. Employees ID, brought over from their company, were nervous, caught in the middle. Some were scared of loyalty conflicts, some of financial ruin if the battle went badly. I called an emergency meeting and realized that my decisions, though justified in my mind, had created fear and tension. I wasn't just fighting for myself anymore. I was responsible for a team who trusted me. That responsibility hit harder than any betrayal, any stolen relationship, any parental slight. That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering if I was still the person who believed in fairness, honesty, and integrity, or if I had become exactly what I feared: a mirror of my parents, cunning fueled by pain and vengeance. AITA for allowing revenge to guide my decisions, even when the people I care about are caught in the crossfire. Or is this what it means to protect what is yours when everyone else underestimated you? Just when I thought I had the upper hand, life threw a curveball I didn't see coming. One Friday morning, a letter arrived, legal, official, and heavy with implications. An old investor, one my parents had long kept in the shadows, had filed a claim. The company, my parents' company, was on the brink of bankruptcy due to mismanagement. But the twist: they alleged that some of my recent business moves had crossed a line legally, the very moves I'd rationalized as fair competition. I sat at my desk, staring at the paper, my heart pounding. Everything I had built, every late night, every strategic decision, suddenly felt fragile. The threat wasn't just my parents' retaliation anymore. It was the law, and if I lost, my company and everyone who depended on it could collapse. Maya came in calm as ever and reviewed the documents. "They're fishing," she said. "Legally, we're clean. But the timing, they want to scare you. They want a crack in your armor." And then Emily called. She had discovered something shocking while talking to my mother, something my parents hadn't expected me to learn. They had deliberately manipulated Kyle, setting him up as the golden child, not just to replace me, but to test me. The truth was harsher than anything I imagined. They never believed I could survive without their guidance. Every betrayal, every cruel move was a calculated experiment in control. I felt rage, disbelief, and an odd twinge of pity all at once. For years, I had been orchestrating revenge against people who had already underestimated me, who had already lost control. And yet, in that moment, I realized the line between justice and obsession had blurred completely. I had to make a choice: push harder, risk everything for complete vindication, or step back, protect my company, and accept that some victories aren't worth the personal cost. That night, I couldn't sleep. I thought about Kyle, Emily, my parents, Maya, and everyone caught in the storm I had unleashed. I realized that revenge, no matter how justified, has consequences that ripple further than you can see. AITA for wanting to win at all costs, even when the very people I fight against have already underestimated me to the point of self-destruction. Or is this just the bitter taste of surviving a world that chews up loyalty and spits out pain? The final week was surreal. My company had grown beyond what I ever imagined. My parents' firm teetered on the edge of collapse, and Kyle's desperation was obvious in every email, every call, every smirk that had once been so smug. Emily reached out again, this time with clarity. She wasn't asking to come back. She wasn't apologizing. She simply said, "I see who you've become. I respect it, but I'm done trying to fix us. I didn't feel victory. I didn't feel loss. I felt exhaustion. Every win, every client, every step that had been designed to prove myself had left a residue of something heavier, a realization that I had changed. Maybe I had become what I had feared most: ruthless, calculating, unrecognizable. The final decision came with the company merger offer. A rival firm, impressed by our growth and strategy, wanted to buy us, and the offer would absorb my parents' company as well. It was the ultimate checkmate. I could take everything, secure my employees, and leave my family to face the consequences of their own choices. Or I could step back, save what remained of their firm, and attempt some kind of reconciliation. I walked through the office late at night, Maya beside me, and I made my choice. I accepted the offer, but I negotiated terms to protect the employees, the clients, and even set aside a portion for my parents. Enough to keep their dignity intact. Kyle got nothing. My parents got a fraction of what they expected. And I got freedom. It was bitter and sweet. Emily never came back. Kyle was furious, but powerless. My parents finally understood that their manipulations had consequences they couldn't control. And me, I realized that revenge can be a teacher. It can push you to heights you never imagined, but it leaves marks, scars you carry even when the storm has passed. Sitting in my new office, overlooking a city I'd fought to reclaim, I allowed myself one quiet thought. I had survived. I had won. But I was different. And maybe that was the real lesson. In the end, survival sometimes requires stepping into the shadows of your own morality, and the only person who can judge you for it is yourself. AITA, for destroying my parents' company to reclaim my life, even when it meant becoming someone I barely recognized. Maybe. But I can't say I regret it.